Coach My Love is for those couples who we consider self-functioning.
We also cater to singles and divorcees.
We like to focus on what you're going through today and creating steps with you to help you move toward tomorrow.
You're going to have some conflict that's unavoidable, but how you resolve the conflict is the difference.
It's not just about today. It's growing with you, with the issues of today's society, and it's personalized. We just don't put you in a one-size-fits-all situation.
And we have the tools that we're not only teaching you, but we have personally used within our own marriage and have proven to be effective. The passion is real, the dedication is there, and we just really want to help you.
Alrighty, people. It's about to go down again with another Coach My Love. Don't be hating on my single. Girl, I got vocals.
Voice of an angel. I love it.
Girl, I got vocals. Yo, people, listen, I am excited to bring you another topic. We got one for y'all, baby. Tell them what we're talking about today.
Today's topic, we're going to be discussing in a relationship. Is it beneficial to stay in a toxic relationship for the sake of the kids?
What? You mean to tell me we about to talk about, should we stay hooking up before these little rascals is what we talking about? What my grandma called them? Them little rascals? Huh? Them babies? All right, listen. Where did this topic come from, baby?
So I was listening to this radio station, and they have different topics in the morning. And there was a caller who called in, obviously, and his question was, I'm in a really bad relationship. My wife treats me horribly. She's cheated on me multiple times. I don't know if I should stay or go, but I want to stay for the sake of the kids.
That's
now,
right.
I'm going to mention something because there was actually 2 callers that struck my attention, and they called consecutively. The caller before him was a woman in a very similar situation. She had kids with her husband. He was a narcissist and abusive to her. And the advice for her was, you should definitely separate from him, but don't divorce him because he needs your support. Don't leave your husband. Support him through his struggle. Stay for the kids because, they need that structure, even though it was toxic.
Okay.
So the next caller was a man, and his situation was the same, but it was his wife who was being verbally abusive and cheating on him. And the advice they gave him was total opposite from what they told the woman. They said, oh, you need to leave her, just divorce her, call it for what it is, and just move on with your life. And it struck me as odd, the double standard when it comes to relationships and how we deal with them. But it was most striking how often, not even from my personal experience growing up, but how many people I've seen and known and we have coached that choose to stay in bad relationships for the sake of the children and what happens as a result to the children.
Okay. Wow. So what radio station was it? I think you was talking about.
Yeah. This was Moody radio station. Moody is a church-based Chicagoland radio station. I think they're national, but it's called Moody Radio, and they have a variety of topics. One of my favorites are obviously family relationships and marriage, and that was the topic of the day.
All right. Okay. So let's talk about it. That's me and you. We're gonna talk about this thing. All right. So the topic was, should someone stay in a relationship for the sake of the kids, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what do you think about it?
Personally, I'll just give you guys a little background from my upbringing. My parents had a very tumultuous relationship. There was no passion. There was no partnership. There was really no marriage. And it was quite toxic from what I was exposed to, both personally and what my father was exposed to. Growing up, I didn't know abuse outside of physical. I never knew about emotional and verbal abuse. But my mother, she was very abusive in many ways to all of us. But when it came to my father, she was extremely emotionally and verbally abusive. And it affected us in many ways. I felt a lot of guilt growing up because my father would constantly remind me that he loved me so much, and the reason he stays is for me to make sure that I'm protected, because he knew what the situation was at home, and he felt it was his responsibility to be there for me. So hearing this for so many years and seeing what he was going through created so much guilt in my heart. Like, if it wasn't for me, my dad would not be going through this. It's my fault that he has to deal with this type of relationship. And it did create some habits within myself when it came to dating later in life, from what I was groomed to accept as being normal and acceptable within a relationship and marriage. I carried that with me. And I met my abuser at only 15 years old because I was inadvertently being groomed for future toxic relationships. And I've known it to go both ways. You can either be groomed from that type of relationship to be a future victim or a future abuser. So it's very detrimental to children to have to grow up in a toxic relationship, even when the parents mean well and want to keep the family together for the sake of the kids.
Okay, so let me talk to you. Let's just real right.
Okay.
When you was in your relationship with your abuser, did you feel like you should have stayed for your child?
Well, initially, yeah.
Why?
Well, because I wanted a family. I grew up with my parents in the same house. And to me, that's what family was. It was sticking it out through the thick and the thin for the kids, having that wholeness and that family environment. And that's what I identified as my norm.
Okay. But now you also told me that one of the other reasons why is the stigma of being a single Black parent, right? Talk about that. What was that about?
Even though I stayed for the sake of keeping the family together, the other part that helped me stay there was knowing what type of woman I was in a relationship and the woman that I am. I never wanted to be associated with such a negative stereotype of being another statistic. So that was just another motivator for me to work harder at the relationship, to endure the worst treatment within a relationship. And it took years of that for me to finally evolve as a woman and individual to leave it for good. And ironically enough, it was because of my son why I ultimately ended up leaving anyway.
What happened?
Well, the abuse, once we were married, just got extremely, extremely bad. It was always bad, but it was just escalating to a point where people's lives were at stake. And as my son was getting older, he was getting a better understanding of what was happening. And I was often beat behind closed doors, so my son didn't see it. But there was one day in particular where there was a fight between us. And I looked up and I saw my son standing in the hallway in like terror. And the look on his face just seared in my mind. And that's when a light bulb struck. Like, as a mother, how can I really say that I'm providing the best living environment and future for him by subjecting him to abuse in the household, by subjecting him to seeing his mother being treated so horribly and grooming him to think that it's normal and acceptable. And I didn't want that life for him, so I left.
So you're saying that when we talk about staying in a relationship for the kids, my thing is, I believe it's like, okay, what happens when staying in that relationship for the kids become worse than leaving, right? And you was experiencing that it was worse for you to stay than it was for you to leave.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I didn't know what would happen when I left. Like, I didn't even think it that far through. I just knew at that moment, whatever was going to happen was worth it, because as long as my son was out of that environment, that was my number one priority. So I definitely feel like in a lot of ways, my son saved my life.
So why do you think a woman or man in a situation, what's some of the reasons why you would think a woman or a guy would stay in a relationship just for the kids?
There are many different reasons why, but I feel like a big part is culture, how we're raised, what we believe, sometimes religion, to make you believe that under no circumstances are you to divorce. You're supposed to love through it, pray for him, forgive him, and keep pushing. Fear is a huge reason people don't leave those situations. They get comfortable with what they call it, the devil that they're comfortable with, or the lesser of two evils. We would rather stay in a toxic relationship than risk leaving to get in potentially a worse relationship. And that was crippling for me because I was afraid, like, what if it did get worse? There are many reasons: insecurity, financial security, and also sometimes people just stay together to have a place to live.
All right. So it wasn't always necessarily just about the kid. It was about having a place to stay. And you said there was a fear that what if the person I go with next is worse than the person that I'm with?
Well, for me, it wasn't about having a place to stay because I've had my own places by myself and I've been independent by myself. But in my mind, it was like, my son needs his father. My son needs a male role model. Even though he was who he was, in my mind, well, that's his father. We're a family, and this is what it is. And especially once we got married, it just added more to the plate as to why I needed to stay.
What do you mean when you got married? What did marriage do?
Well, it legally bounded us as a family. And I felt like throughout the duration of our relationship, as bad as it was, the end goal was ultimately to get married. Even without understanding the purpose of marriage. I just knew in the church I had to get married. I'm not going to lie. We're going to be honest. I wasn't a virgin. I enjoyed sex. And I felt like having sex outside of marriage was holding me back spiritually. So to make it right with God, I had to get married. So it had nothing to do with being in love, like any of that. It was more about fulfilling a spiritual obligation. And that was wrong.
And when you got married, were you still convicted, or did it make it better?
What do you mean?
Well, you said, you enjoy sex. Mm-hmm. So you got married because you wanted to have sex without feeling bad. Yeah. When you got married, how was the sex?
The sex stopped.
So
sex stopped.
So the sex stopped.
Yeah.
After doing all this for a big person, that's the reason why you did it, and you did it, and that was it. Sex stopped.
Well, not on my part, but my partner withdrew that from me. It was just another tactic of abuse to withdraw sex from me within the marriage, knowing that I wouldn't step out and knowing I wouldn't go to anybody else. So if this person knew that they can control just another aspect of my life, that's what they did. But even going back to just any typical relationship, a lot of people stay in bad relationships for a lot of wrong reasons, but it's very unfair to peg it on your children to make them, kids aren't stupid. They see it, they know it, they feel it. But to let your children know that I'm doing this for you, that's the worst feeling and guilt to have to carry as a child. And it really sows a lot of bad seeds for them in the future for their own relationships. Mm. I want you to talk about that client. We want to let you guys know this. We have full disclosure and permission to discuss this. We won't name names, but I'm excited for him to share a story about a client that he had who was in a similar situation.
All right, so I met one of our clients who was married for 30 years, and now he's been divorced for 4 years. And I asked him, why wait so long? Why did you get a divorce? And he said, well, they stayed for the sake of the kids. Now this client that we knew was 58 years old. He's been divorced for 4 years, and he's now getting back into the dating game, which is totally changed. He's like, he doesn't really know how to engage. He doesn't really know how to connect. And I asked him, was it worth it? And he said he's not sure, which to me is another way of saying no. If something was worth it, then you would say it's worth it. Like there will be no question. So when you say you're not sure, that means that it wasn't worth it. But he's so hurt because he stayed in something for so long and he feels bad about it. Instead of admitting it, he'll skirt around it because he knows it was not a good decision. It was a bad decision. And he said the kids knew that they were together for them because they felt it. They felt like there was no passion, there was no love, there was nothing going on in that marriage. And the Bible says, train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they're going to depart from it. And a lot of times we think that means the good part about training up a child, the good stuff. But that train up a child in the way that they should go. Basically, what that verse is talking about is however you're training up your child in the way that you think they should go, when they are old, they won't depart from it. So the should is neutral. The should is neutral. It's dependent upon you as a parent, what you see. So if you train up a child to hit your spouse, if you train up a child to disrespect your spouse, if you train up a child to cheat, if you train up a child to abandon, then that's what they think they should do. And that's what they will do when they get into relationships, whether it's subconscious or consciously. You're training them up in the way that you think that they should go. And it doesn't always have to be by your verbal. You know, they always say, do as I say, not as I do, but that's a lie. Yeah. Because children are going to do what you do, not as you say, right? They're going to see you, they're going to follow you, they're going to imitate you. I remember when I was married and divorced, when I was talking to my kids, my children were skeptical about getting married. And my daughter and my son would say, well, Dad, you and Mom got a divorce, and most of the people that we saw got a divorce. So they think that that's what's going to happen in relationships. And, you know, I'm hurt that was an image that they saw of me, but I couldn't control that, right? Then I said, well, what about my new relationship? You know, we're happy, we're strong, we're healthy. But the only thing it seems to me, and this is in life, people remember the bad stuff more than they do the good stuff. Yes. The bad stuff always stands out way more than good stuff. That's just nature. That's just natural, right? So they're going to remember the bad. So when you're in a relationship with someone, just for the sake of the kids, you're not doing your kids any favors by staying in that relationship. Trust me, because they're going to feel the tension. They're going to feel the stress. They're going to feel that, hey, mommy and daddy, this ain't even real. And if they don't say it, they're going to think, well, that this is just kind of how it is. Because it's going to be disrespect. It's going to be, even if you're going to put on a fake smile and a fake family dinners and events and stuff like that, they're going to feel it. You know what I'm saying? So I know a lot of people, well, I won't say I know a lot of people, but I've met people in my life who struggled with the fact that a parent left when they were younger. And I know for a fact there's a Pastor John Hanna, who struggled with the fact that his father left him. But God spoke to his heart and told him he had to leave. Because if he wouldn't have, you wouldn't have became a pastor. You wouldn't have became a man of God. Because his father was a gang member and a drug addict. And if he would have stayed in his life, he would have followed the influence of his father. They found his father with a needle in his arm, overdosed, dead in an abandoned building. And if he would have kept that relationship, he would have went down the wrong path. Sometimes leaving is the best thing that you can do. Yeah. Sometimes staying is more dangerous than leaving.
Yeah. And even to finish up our statement with the client we had, it was so interesting that even though he's in his late 50s and he was married for 30 years, he divorced 4 years ago, but he said that ever since he's been divorced, he's never been happier in his life or more free. We need to stop holding on to these relationships that are stunting our growth and stunting our purpose in life, because a lot of times those people being out of our lives are the best thing for us and our children. Because sometimes having them around is going to do nothing but create negativity and bad vibes and bad examples. Yeah. And even for me growing up, I can definitely relate to the kids that seeing what I saw growing up. Yeah. I knew by 16 years old, I ain't never getting married. I'll never want kids. Like, I don't want this life. It was a living hell for me growing up, from not just what I had to go through, but it was a lot. It was so much. And it was something I would never want to recreate in my adult life ever. So I had a very distorted perception of what marriage relationships was. I just thought it was sticking it through, tough and the good, like just making it happen. And I never got it until much later in life, my late 20s, after the first marriage had failed. That's when I really got it. And that's also why we do Coach My Love, because we've learned and studied so much. We really want to help everyone else out there who is going through a lot of what we've been through, and just give you the tools and resources to help prevent a lot of unnecessary drama that you don't need.
Yeah, amen, amen. So, in closing, we don't really believe that you should stay in a relationship for the kids. That's the worst thing that you can do, because there's going to be resentment. There's going to be backlash. You don't want to spend the rest of your life resenting the decision. You don't want to be like my client at 58 years old, now trying to find a love in his life. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that for the sake of the children. Because you know what? Your children, they're important, but they're not more important than you. They're not. Think about this, for example. When you're on an airplane and you go with your child and they're giving you the safety rules and regulations, and they'll tell you this: if the oxygen mask falls from the ceiling, they say before you put it on the child, put it on you first, right? Now, you think your natural instinct is to put it on the child first because they're little and they're helpless. But the key is, if you're doing all that work to your child and you pass out, then you're no longer a help to your child. You're no longer a help to be able to do anything for your child. So take care of yourself first. If you are strong and healthy as a single person or a person that's co-parenting and you guys have a relationship, then the children will be okay. Okay. They need to learn that everything is not roses and sugar cones, and that in life things do happen. But I think it's more powerful for them to see two functioning co-parenting people that decided to leave so that they can be healthy for themselves and raise them than it is for you two to be together to create this false life that does not exist. Because what do you think is going to happen once they get old enough and then you get a divorce? You don't think that's more devastating to see y'all been together for 30 years and now y'all divorced? You don't think that's just as devastating too? As an older person, they're going to be like, what you doing? Y'all been together for 30 years? So you mean to tell me all this time it was a lie? That's going to also be affected. So you're not doing them any favors by sticking in a relationship for the sake of them.
And even with the oxygen mask analogy, ladies and gentlemen, because this affects men too. I hate the fact that there is such an underrepresentation for men who are in these bad relationships. That's why, like with my advocacy, I advocate for both men and women. Consider the fact, if you are in a toxic relationship that's tearing away at you daily, that's breaking you down to the core where you're nothing but a shell of a person, how great of a parent can you really be for that child when you're not even there 100%? Because this relationship is breaking you down to nothing. That's why we focus on Coach My Love to being whole, healthy individuals. It's imperative. Whether you're single, married, divorced, whatever stage you are in life, you have to make sure that you are together. Because you're only as good of a parent or a spouse or an individual as much as you invest in making yourself happy, whole, and complete.
Amen. And so that's going to be our time for another episode of Coach My Love. We appreciate you guys. Remember to like, share, subscribe to our channel. Visit us online at CoachMyLove.com and on YouTube, Coach My Love TV. And if you have any questions, please leave a question or a comment. Let us know what you think of this video. Let us know your opinion. Should someone stay in a relationship for the sake of the children? So that we can read and see what you guys are saying, see what you guys are thinking, okay? I know we're not alone on this, and our opinion is our opinion. I want to see what you guys got to say, okay? And email us at coachmylovetoday@gmail.com, okay? I am your boy, certified relationship coach, Michael.
And Shavon Ballard. And guys, always remember, never apply good information to a bad situation.
All right, guys. We love you guys. Peace.